Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 951B, and today's date is April 21st, 2016, and the title of the episode is U.S. and the Coalition Forces are waiting for the green light to carry out Plan B. Let's get into the economic collapse, political, and geopolitical news. At this point, we're realizing that the United States and many other countries, we are living in a fascist country where government and corporations work together and they work for each other, not for the people. And we're starting to see that government officials, lawyers, judges, and others, they're trying to convince and brainwash the people that corporations have rights. They're the same as people. And of course, in a fascist country, this is something that you would expect. And we really need to understand what a right is and see if it applies to a corporation. So when we look at a right, we have to say where our rights originate from. Where are they derived from? Well, our rights are derived from the Constitution of our nations, also the United Nations. They have a law called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. However, as this document has only quasi-official status with our various nations, our rights are primarily derived from the Constitution. And our Constitution exists above the level of our government. It's we the people, and the government must follow the Constitution. The government is not above the Constitution. Because the people decide what's going to be added to the Constitution and what's going to be removed from the Constitution through amendments, where the majority have to say, okay, this is what we're going to do. And this is how we're going to make a change. The government just can't come in and modify the Constitution on its own. It has to be the majority of the people. So our rights exist legally above the level of our governments. And because our rights exist above the legal level of our governments do not bestow rights. They don't hand them out. Rather, our human rights are intrinsic. Governments cannot grant the rights. Equally, they cannot take them away either. Now, privileges, they resemble rights, except for one crucial distinction, and that is privileges are revocable. Our government do have the legal authority to grant privileges, and thus to revoke those privileges. A corporation is an inanimate paper entity. These paper shells have been created in order to facilitate the deployment of wealth and thus facilitate commerce. Corporations are the creation of government. Corporations have legal status created by our governments and thus legal status equal to our governments, but well below the status of our human rights. Corporations could never have rights. Our legal rights exist above the level of our governments. And how do corporations get created? By governments, so they're below governments. So this is how we know that corporations cannot have rights. So if they cannot bestow rights to the people, they cannot bestow rights upon inanimate corporations. Entities with legal status equal to that of our government, they lack the authority. Similarly, if a government cannot legally bestow rights upon corporations, they cannot elevate corporations to a status equal to that of the people. But of course, our government officials intertwine with these corporate entities. They're trying to brainwash the public in thinking that corporations are equal to a real-life person. And as time goes on, I'm sure this is going to be in Common Core, where the brainwashing is going to continue. And we can see what they're trying to do at this point. And what we have to realize is that rights are not given or taken away. We're born with them. We have the rights to do what we want, to travel, to be free, to be heard, to protest. We have the right not to be searched. And if the government can't abide by our contract, then the government is null and void. Because the people are above the government. The people are the boss of the government. It's not the other way around. And we're seeing right now that this fascist government is trying to convince the population that it's the opposite. And we all need, once again, to come together and tell these people absolutely not. And if we have to, take out the Constitution, read it in front of them. Can you imagine millions and millions of people reading the Constitution to the government and telling them to step down because they broke the contract with the people? I mean, that would be a huge impact, and that would show the entire world, look how powerful the rights of the people are. And this is why we need to come together as a people, not just here in the United States, but in Canada, Europe, UK, Australia, and every country around the world. Now, out in Turkey, we know that Turkey wants to be part of the EU. They want to have the visa waiver terms where people can move in and out of the country. And the EU is looking at this, and of course Turkey is bribing the EU with the refugees. And it looks like 10 days before the deadline, it looks like Turkey has met fewer than half the conditions for its citizens to be granted early visa-free travel. And it looks like Turkey is not going to be there. And of course, if this doesn't happen, guess what Turkey's going to do? They're going to release the refugees and say, okay, all bets are off. Now, out in Ukraine, we see things are really starting to heat up. The new Ukraine Prime Minister, Groysman, has said the country will neither hold negotiations nor purchase coal or oil or gas from Russia. And we see Poroshenko is out there and says no talks on lifting any sanctions against Russia until Russia withdraws its military presence from Ukraine. And we're not going to fulfill the Minsk peace deal whatsoever. And what he's saying right now, and he's using a lot of propaganda, he's saying that Russia is now building up troops in the southeastern area. They're bringing in heavy weapons. They're bringing in troops. And they're getting ready for a major offensive. Now, we know this is the opposite. We know this is propaganda. Because, again, if this was absolutely true and they're bringing in the tanks and the heavy weaponry, we know that the U.S., we know the EU, we know Ukraine, they all have satellites above. We would be seeing pictures of this all over the place. Just like when Russia was in Syria and we saw the Russian jets on the runway in Syria, those satellite images were crystal clear. They were color. They were 3D. If this was true, we would see the same thing. This is how you know this is false. We also see the president is now meeting with Germany, France, UK. He's meeting with Merkel. He's meeting with David Cameron. He's meeting with Hollande. He's meeting with the Italian prime minister. And they're discussing Ukraine. Because what's happening right now is that everything is breaking down. Right now, Ukraine is out there, and it sounds just like the United States when they said, the Syria war with the Islamic State is going to last for a very long time. Well, Poroshenko is out there saying the Ukraine war is going to take years before it comes to an end. So we're seeing that we're on the same exact path, and they're taking their orders from the United States because they're using the same exact language. We're also seeing that the OSCE, which claims to be neutral, that they've been hiding certain things that have been going on in Ukraine. And what they've been hiding is that the Ukrainian army is attacking the Donbass on a daily basis. And they're bringing in more mercenaries. They're bringing in the right sector troops. And we're starting to see they're bringing in more military assets right up to the contact line. And we're starting to see that the OSCE might not be this neutral organization that's trying to be fair for both sides. It looks like they're working to hide certain elements of what the Ukrainian forces are doing. And we can see right now that things are starting to ramp up in Ukraine. Talks are breaking down. And Poroshenko has said, listen, we're not going to complete the Minsk II ceasefire because Russia is building up troops, and it looks like we're getting ready for a major offensive, and the U.S. is going to drive this completely. Now, as we can see, since the Ukraine crisis going forward, we've seen the U.S. and NATO, they have been pushing and pushing Russia, provoking, poking, doing whatever they possibly can to get Russia to do something, placing sanctions, lowering the oil prices. And we see Russia, they are taking precautions. They're saying, listen, if you're going to continue to do this, we're going to make all necessary measures, precautions, to compensate for what is happening here. And if you look at the map of where NATO and the U.S. is, we see that they are completely surrounded. And we can see right now that Russia is looking at this saying, okay, the U.S., NATO, they're preparing for war. They're continually trying to provoke us. And we see that Russia right now is trying not to get involved in any of this. China's doing the same thing because they know what the plan is at this point. We see the USS Donald Cook, as we remember, it sailed very close to the base of Russia. They were having simulated drills in destroying Russian bases and things like that. And this is why Russia said, okay, we need to go take a look at this, and we need to see what's happening here. If Russia had a ship, a military ship off the coast of New York or the Gulf of Mexico in that region, or off the coast of California, and they were doing the same thing, what would the U.S. do? Well, they would send a couple of jet fighters out there to inspect on what is going on here. But of course, the corporate media right now is making a big deal of what Russia did and not what the U.S. was doing, because remember, they want everyone to see the other side. Just like a bully who pokes someone every day in the hallway until that kid couldn't take it anymore and lashes out at the bully. No one saw the poking all through the last couple of weeks. They only saw the kid lash out. This is what they're trying to do to each one of these countries. And we see right now that the U.S., in this entire area, they are getting ready for a major offensive. And we see that the U.S. is going to be going after Iran. They're going to be going after Syria. They're going to be going after Russia. They're going to be going after China, North Korea. And remember, they had the nuclear peace deal with Iran, and we knew this was not part of it. And we knew it was part of getting into their central banking system to put the dollar on the oil reserves. And the president is saying, despite the Iran nuclear deal, Gulf Cooperation Council continues to have serious concerns about the behavior of Iran. And what he's really saying is that Iran is not cooperating with the central banking system. Just like Saudi Arabia wants to say, okay, I see what's happening with the petrodollar. We need to move away from this. And the U.S. is bringing them back in, saying, you will do what we say. So we're starting to see that Russia, Iran, Syria, they are making a huge, huge push in Aleppo. The Syrian Air Force, they have dropped thousands of leaflets in homes in Aleppo and all these different regions saying that you need to surrender at this time or we are coming in with a major offensive. Now, are the paid mercenaries going to surrender? No, but they're giving them the chance, and they dropped the leaflet. Right now, Obama, he has admitted that the ceasefire, the talks, they are collapsing. And the White House is very concerned about Russia bringing in military equipment into Syria. Well, let's think about this for a second. Russia was invited by the president of a sovereign country. He said, we need your assistance. He also said this to Iran, and they're bringing in military equipment. The United States, England, Spain, France, Denmark, they were not invited into Syria. Australia. But they're in there with weapons, building runways, taking over air bases. They have ground troops in a sovereign nation. They didn't check with the president of Syria. They just decided to invade. So Obama is out there, and he's met with the Gulf states, and he's talking to them saying we remain united in our fight against the Islamic State, which is a complete joke because everyone knows at this point that the U.S. and the Gulf nations, they created these proxy armies. Now, if they're really in the fight against the Islamic State, why didn't they invite Russia into this, saying we're all together fighting this? Well, Russia's really destroying the Islamic State, the proxy arm of the United States government, and the United States government central bankers, they haven't been. This is why they're not going to invite Russia in, because Russia's really doing the job. Now, Washington, they are doing everything they possibly can to break the truce. Now, they've come up with this idea that Syria decided to bomb the marketplace. They used barrel bombs, and they dropped them in this region. And then it came out from all the photos that were released that the destruction was much greater than a barrel bomb could do. And of course, all of a sudden, they changed the story. Oh, it wasn't barrel bombs. It was, air targets. And they keep changing the stories, trying to convince everyone that the Syrian forces came in and hit their own people. The question is, why would they do this? They're winning the hearts of the people. The people are voting for Assad, actually, which shows that the people are for Assad. They're liberating towns, villages, cities, getting rid of terrorists. He looks like a war hero, and the U.S. knows this. The U.S. is fighting an uphill battle, and they're losing. So what we're seeing right now is that Russia, Iran, and Syria, they're preparing for this major offensive in Aleppo. They're going to try to take it all. And of course, this is a key strategic area. They don't want this to happen. And what we're seeing right now is the U.S., they're getting ready to intensify airstrikes in Syria. Under the new rules, like we discussed, they have this sliding scale of how many people they can kill. Well, they're going to come in now, and they're going to start bombing. Now, we have to think to ourselves, why did they create this sliding scale all of a sudden? Well, we know they were implicated in killing many civilians. They had to explain it away. But remember, they have B-52 bombers that they're going to use in Syria. These B-52 bombers, they're going to inflict much, much more damage. And guess what? They're going to hit many more civilians and kill many more people. So they had to come up with an excuse, and all they have to do is change the rules, of it's okay. And this is what's happening, because this is part of the offensive. Now, during this time, we see Turkey, they have increased their number of tanks, howitzers on the border with Syria. Because we already know that everything's starting to break down, and they're getting prepared for this major offensive. Now, there are certain sleeper cells inside Syria that are assassinating certain individuals in the city of Idlib. And they're taking out key individuals because it looks like whoever was working with Russia or involved in talks and trying to work out the situation, these people are being removed. And what we're seeing right now is that United Arab Emirates, Jordan, Israel, they're setting up fortress cities for the Syrian rebels to keep them safe in certain areas. So this whole entire thing is reaching a point where the whole thing's going to go live. They're just waiting for the green light. And we can see already with Obama's statement that the ceasefire talks are collapsing. They never wanted these to succeed in the first place. And we need to keep our eyes open. Everyone needs to be on watch, because we can expect some type of major false flag event. Maybe the U.S. and the coalition forces will just go ahead and start attacking. Maybe they'll make it look like they're going after the Islamic State and actually start bombing the Syrian government forces, saying, oops, it was a mistake. Oop, we took out that power grid by accident. The water system was damaged by accident. But Russia, they already know what's going on here. And this is going to be a huge problem. So the next phase here, as we know, the plan B was to bring in ground troops. And we know for a number of months now, they've been bringing in the coalition forces, more military assets, more troops to this area. And it looks like they're getting ready to push plan B forward right now. And I think their ultimate goal is no longer to get Assad removed. I think their ultimate goal is saying, listen, we need an all-out war with Russia. And we need to do this now because the economy is falling apart. Nations want to dump the petrodollar. Things are rapidly deteriorating. We've seen the emergency meetings with the president, the vice president, finance ministers, bankers, Yellen, try to come up with different plans to keep the system propped up, to talk about what is happening. And the last time this happened, I think we had the housing crisis after the meetings. So we're starting to see that things are rapidly falling apart. They realize this, and now they're going to take it up a notch. We're reaching the next level. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.